Welcome to another episode of This Too Shall Suck podcast, where we talk about the real of grief, the whole grief, and nothing but the grief. Welcome back, my loves. I am your host, Loryn Denise, and I'm so happy to have you here. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm super thankful for your listen. And if you're listening again, welcome back. And thank you so much for continuing to join me on this journey. On today's episode, we're going to be diving into the loss of identity or loss of self, really loss of identity when it comes to grief. And that's why I named it Lost Without You. Number one, because I love that Robin Thicke song. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Lost without you. I don't know. Get into these vocals. Listen, your girl can be on The Voice. I know. I know, guys. No autographs. But yeah, we're going to talk about the loss of identity when it comes to grief. And I want to talk about the different kind of losses of identity when it does come to grief, because I think, of course, obviously people are like, oh, I just kind of lose myself when it comes to me losing somebody. But I think it's important to identify the identities or identity that you lose sometimes when it comes to grief. And I think it also depends on the type of grief that you're going through that will define the loss of identity that you have. And so I actually read this article. It was a really good article about grief and the loss of identity. And this person, I don't know if it was a woman or a man, I can't remember, but they did a really good job on defining the different type of losses of identity. So I want to go through that and just give you some tips of kind of how to navigate when you're going through those moments, because it's going to happen. And whether it doesn't have to be anything like super large, or it doesn't have to be anything like crazy, but it's definitely going to happen at one point or another in the grieving process. It's not necessarily like a stage of grief. Like, they have the stages of grief, the denial, all those other stages. I can't ever remember them, but they have all those stages. So this is kind of like a part of one of those stages. And so in this particular article, they defined identity as how we define ourselves and the story we tell ourselves about who we are. And it all comes together to create our identity. I thought that was amazing, because if you think about it, like we define who we are. And I define as a Black woman, right? Somebody else can define as a Black man or a white woman or a non-conforming binary. There's different ways that people define themselves, and the story that we tell ourselves about who we are. I think it was brilliant because it's not what people say that you are, or it's not what society says that you are. It's the story we tell ourselves about who we are, is the identity of who we are, how we define ourselves, and the story that we tell ourselves about who we are. So I really, really enjoyed that definition. And so I think a lot of times we think about when we're going through grief, right? We think about the tangible losses. So we think about if we lost a person, like I lost my mom and dad, right? So I think about the loss of the person, or if your house went into foreclosure, you lose that house, or you lose the job, or you lose the relationship, which those are losses, right? Those are kind of the primary losses. That is the actual kind of tangible item that was lost. And I think we focus a lot on that, but we neglect the secondary losses. So the secondary losses are those things like our identity, our confidence, our drive, our motivation, our will to do better, our purpose, right? So because we have this primary loss of a person, of a relationship, of the house, then we have that secondary loss that sometimes we don't acknowledge because we don't necessarily know that that's what's happening, because we are so focused on that actual thing that was lost, and we just kind of neglect what's going on, or we just don't want to acknowledge it. But I am here to tell you that it is important to acknowledge those things and to recognize that is what's happening in order for you to be able to grow and in order for you to be able to heal properly. So I will get into the different types of identities that we have. So there's a couple different ones. So the first one that I'll talk about is relational identity. So if you think about this one, relational relationship, right? So, for example, I use myself as an example. So a piece of my identity was that I am a daughter, right? I'm not going to say was, I am a daughter. So I am a daughter of Dennis and Glenda, and Dennis and Glenda passed away, right? And so now this piece of my identity of being a daughter, that's what I said. I could literally say, oh, well, I was a daughter, because now that tangible item, that tangible piece is gone, my mom and dad. And so now I've lost this relational piece of myself, because that daughter piece was based on the relationship of my mom and dad. But just because they're not here physically doesn't mean that I'm not a daughter, right? Just because they're not tangibly here doesn't mean that I'm not a daughter. Or we'll go into people who are divorced, right? I was a wife, or I am a wife. You get divorced, like, well, I was a wife. So now that relational piece of you was gone. That kind of important piece of who you were is gone. Like, well, I'm not a wife any further. So some people even go as far to say is, okay, well, if I'm not a wife, you start questioning yourself. Well, who am I if I'm not a wife? Who am I if I'm not a daughter? Who am I if I'm not a mother? Right? And so you start questioning those things, because that relational piece of you, that piece of you is gone. And like I said, whether it's through a divorce, whether it's through death, whether it's through, a miscarriage, that relational piece is gone. And oftentimes, people don't like to talk about this, but it's the truth. Caregivers, so for example, I kind of turned into a caregiver for my dad when he was going through his transition, as I say, when he got sick. So not now I've transitioned from a daughter to being a caregiver. So now this role is different. So I'm still a daughter, but I'm the daughter who's a caregiver for my dad, right? And so now he's gone. So now a kind of a sense of purpose is gone. So my purpose is a little less clear, because now, and I had this conversation with one of my girlfriends a while ago. She said, Loryn, I think it's time for you to kind of move and get out of Atlanta. We were just talking about different things. She said your main purpose of being there was to take care of your parents. Your mom passed, she's gone. You're taking care of your dad. He passed, he's gone. So now what is it? What is that purpose? What is that thing that's keeping you there? And when she said that, I couldn't say anything, because that was like my sole purpose is I can't go anywhere. I have to take care of my dad. I got to make sure he's okay. Like, I literally was looking at jobs out of state, and then when he started getting really sick, I stopped, because I'm like, I cannot go anywhere out of Georgia, because I have to be here to take care of him. And then when he passed, or when he transitioned, now that purpose is a little less clear. It's kind of like, okay, well, why can't you look for jobs out of state? What, like, now, you know what I mean? Now I'm kind of like, well, okay, well, who am I if if I'm not taking care of him? And so now what happens sometimes, and in my case happened, is you try and transition to say, well, if I'm not taking care of him, now I got to find somebody else to take care of. And I think that's been me my whole life. Let me just be like transparent. Like, I've always been the person to try and take care. And so it became like, okay, well, I can't do that because, he's here. He passed away. Okay, well, now you don't have that. Okay, well, I got to take care of X, Y, and Z, right? So it kind of gets a little blurred, and you lose that sense of self, and it's hard to regain who you are, because you really took over that role of who you were, whether it was a wife, whether it was a daughter, whether it was a husband, whether it was a son, whether it was a caregiver, and now you're just trying to navigate that. Um, and oftentimes some people with the divorce, I'll talk about that, or even divorce relationship, people feel a loss of community, because you've heard a lot of times that when you're married and you have all these friends, now you lose the friends that you kind of met through your husband, or through your wife, or through your boyfriend, or through your girlfriend. And so you almost lose a sense of community and connection with people who are still alive, because you may have been really good friends with your ex-husband's wife, but now it's like, oh, well, y'all aren't married anymore, so are we friends? Can I call her? She may be funny when y'all talk, because your ex-husband said something to his friend, and now his friends like, don't be talking to her. It's like that. So you lose a sense of community. So You lose again, it's that relational, whatever that relation was, you lose something from that. And so that's a relational identity where you're like, okay, well, if I'm not a caregiver, who am I? If I'm not a husband or a wife, who am I? If I'm not a mother or a father, who am I? So that is relational identity. And so another one is professional identity. So, and it's funny, we're kind of dive into that a little bit more on my next episode. But you think about things when people say, I am a teacher, I am an event planner, I am a doctor, I am a business owner. So you're typically, well, let me not say typically, a lot of people, their profession plays a huge part in who you are, who we are, I'll say. Because if again, profession as far as like a 9 to 5 or a business owner, right? So I'll talk about retirees. So think about somebody who has been working for 40 years and now they retire. So now they lose a sense of community because they were going to work every day, and they have all these people who they've met and they know, and now they're at home. You always hear about these retirees who are at home and they do like all this like housework, and they do all this housework in the first 6 months, and then after that they're kind of like, so now what? So now I got to look at my husband or wife, and I've been having this kind of, not secret, but this like sense of community over here for a long time. And now I'm not seeing these people every day. And now I'm not having a sense of purpose to say I am the best, whatever, insert job title is. And so a lot of people lose kind of that sense of community and that sense of they have to restructure their day, or they have to decide kind of like what their purpose is, because they may have been the best administrative assistant in the game, but now who are you assisting? You're assisting yourself. You're not talking to your boss every day. You're not talking to your coworkers every day. Like, you're having to readjust. And so a lot of retirees sometimes have that grief of losing their sense of community because that was their job for so long. And so a lot of them go through that. And again, kind of just they're just trying to restructure and adjust and navigate. And if you think about business owners, so you have a business, it's doing great. I know a lot of businesses, unfortunately, right now with COVID, are not doing that well, and a lot of businesses are closing. And so imagine saying, I'm a business owner, I own X, Y, and Z. I own Joe's Pizza Shop, and Joe's Pizza Shop is now closed because of COVID, or for whatever reason. So now you've lost this sense of success. Like, okay, I'm successful because I have this, poppin' pizza business, and my family's good and all these things. And now you don't have that anymore. So now you've lost that piece of who you are, which can lead to, which I'll talk about, like financial identity and stuff like that. But you're just losing a piece of who you are, and losing that, again, that sense of success, that sense of accomplishment, sense of whatever that business meant to you. And so your business was like, I'm a business owner, I am Joe, I own this pizza shop, and now you don't have that. So it's like, well, now I'm just Joe. I don't have this. I don't have Joe's Pizza Shop, so now I'm just Joe. So you kind of lose that part of you. Another identity that we sometimes lose, which I was sharing that I was struggling with a little bit, is kind of a spiritual identity. So whether you subscribe to a religion, Christian, Muslim, Buddhism, or you're just someone who identifies as spiritual, when you're going through spiritual growth and you're doing a lot of researching and you're doing a lot of understanding of self, sometimes you can lose your spiritual identity. So, like, for example, I define myself as Christian, right? That's the identity of who I am. But I've been sharing with several people around me that I've kind of been having and I hate to say identity crisis, because that's not what I don't not an identity crisis, but I've just been learning and growing in my spirituality, in my connection with God. And now it's like, okay, well, am I a Christian? Do I define as Christian? Do I define as this? And so I'm kind of losing my identity in the Christian, like Loryn, who is a Christian, right? Because again, if we go back to identity, it's how we define ourselves. I'm Loryn, I'm a Black woman, I'm a Christian. And so now, as I'm learning different things and I'm growing and I'm shifting and I'm just trying to figure out what it is that I want to be and identify, I feel like I've kind of had that spiritual identity is lost because again, I identified like this is so long, but learning different things and hearing different things, I'm like, oh, okay, well, is that it? So I think a lot of people go through that as they grow in their spiritual connection and just trying to figure out and research who they are. I will say, like, I feel like millennials, and I can again just talk about like our generation. Like, I feel like we ask so many questions. We're like, well, why? Well, okay, well, why does that do that? Or that doesn't really make sense. Or, I feel like we have a lot of questions. And so now we question things more. And I think, our generation is just like, okay, well, I don't identify as this or identify as that, or why do I have to? But why do I have to identify? And so I feel like a lot of us have kind of had that spiritual identity or that spiritual, um, yeah, just lost a spiritual identity from what we were maybe growing up based off our parents' decisions, and now being adults and saying, okay, well, I have questions and I want to learn and I want to grow. So definitely spiritual identity is something that I myself have gone through, and something that I'll just be transparent, something I'm currently going through. So if we talk about financial identity, so people don't think that finances are a part of who we are, but that is so far off from who we are. And again, that's not saying, and well, for some people, it's I'm Lauren, I'm black, I'm a Christian, and I'm a millionaire. And again, some people don't. Some people just, say that as affirmation. Some people really are that, but being able, what it really means is like the financial stability to be able to take care of yourself and your family if you have a family, right? And so again, I can talk about, well, I'll talk about the conversations that I've had with my friends who are in the black community. We feel a sense of when we, and I know in other communities they feel this way. Again, I'm just talking about the conversations that I've had, that we feel like, okay, we need to get to a certain place to be able to take care of our mother, our father, our grandma, our aunts, our nieces, our nephews, our whatever, right? And so when you're not in a place to be able to do that, or when you're struggling to do that, or you don't feel like you're working hard or trying to figure out how you can create those things, you kind of have this financial loss or financial identity crisis, because you're like, okay, well, I know that I make this amount of money. I know that I can take care of 10 people currently. Why can't I take care of 20 people? Why can't I, be a millionaire tomorrow? Like, all these things start happening in your mind. And so, or you may have been making six figures at your job. You lost your job due to COVID, due for whatever reason. And so now that pride of being able to take care of all these things now is gone. And so now you're just trying to figure out, okay, how can I get back to six figures? How can I make the money quickest? How can I, if I don't make six figures now, how can I just be able to take care of my family? Right. And so it even with, I can talk about, when people get sick or when people die, the financial impact that has on you sometimes if that person doesn't have life insurance, or just from all the goodness, I can talk about it, the healthcare costs that they leave, or if they didn't have their affairs in order, all those different things can be an impact to you. And so now you've lost your identity financially to say, okay, well, I'm comfortable, but now, things happen. Again, you lose your job, people get sick. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. And so now that financial identity that you had is now shaken or is now changed. And you're kind of like, okay, how do I bounce back? How do I pivot from this? How do I make this work? And so sometimes it really starts weighing on you, and you lose who you are because you're so focused on trying to get back to this place or trying to get to this place instead of just focusing on who you should be, and those things will come. That's just my thought on it. That doesn't mean it's right. That's just my thought on it. And then the last kind of identity is our physical identity. So, of course, you know, uh, a lot of us, uh, me, okay, so a lot of us, as we go through things, we allow stress in our lives and we use unhealthy coping mechanisms such as drinking, such as overeating, such as not working out. And so physically we change, right? Or some people, they have kids and they let themselves go. And I'm not talking about just women, men, I'm talking about you too. So cut it out. Or again, that financial thing, you may not have the money. So you're like, okay, I was going to the gym every day. Now I can't afford the gym, but I just don't want to work out at home, or I don't have the equipment, or whatever the case may be, or you get hurt and you can't work out anymore. And so we lose who we were physically. So back, I was looking at pictures the other day and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so skinny. I'm like, I don't want to be that small, but I would like to get back to, lose a little weight. So you lose who you are in yourself, and you're like, okay, well, if I was this size, and I can just talk about myself, if I was this size, and I'm not talking about now, like back then I really had this kind of insecurity, or again this identity crisis of, well, if I was smaller then guys would like me. Oh girl, oh, if I can go back and talk to old Lauren. But you kind of lose yourself and start like creating these scenarios in your mind of like, oh well, like again, you get hurt if you're so I know some guys who like were NFL players and they got hurt, and now they're not working out as hard. They're not doing NFL workouts, right? So you're like chilling or you're regular working out and you done gained some weight. You an NFL player. What I'm saying? Your body, you got body mass, okay? And so when you gain weight, it's you're solid, all right. And they're like, man, like, back in my NFL days, and all these things, right? And you lose yourself, but you have identified with this body or this idea of what you're supposed to look like so much, instead of focusing on being healthy, that you've lost yourself. And so that's where you get a lot of these eating disorders from, because people are trying to focus or obsess over this idea of what they're supposed to look like, as opposed to like, you know what, I just want to be healthy. So I'm going to stop eating this. I'm going to work out this many times a week. I'm going to do these things to change my lifestyle in order to get to a place where I am physically comfortable with me, not what I think I should be, not the identity of, okay, I'm Lauren, I'm Black, I'm a Christian, I'm a millionaire, and I am a bikini competition person, right? I just need to be, I'm Lauren, I am Black, I am spiritual, and I connect with God. I make enough money in my bank account, in my checkings, in my savings, and overflow abundantly in my life, so I don't have to worry about anything, and I'm healthy, right? And so these are kind of the words that you have to change your mindset in order to create an identity that is healthy, and that is not something that, if it's you don't attain it at a particular time, or don't attain it at all. Like, if I'm like, I'm a millionaire and I don't attain to be a millionaire by the time I pass away, that I'm not depressed, or I don't hate my life by the time that I'm gone. You know what I mean? Or if I don't get bikini competition ready, but I'm healthy, I feel comfortably in my clothes, I have a clean bill of health, that I'm comfortable and that I'm good with that, right? So it's just about changing that mindset to be a overall amazing um individual, and identify as someone who is healthy and happy with who they are. So those are the different type of losses of identities that you have. But I want to talk about some, just a few quick tips on how you can kind of bring yourself back, or get through those moments that you do lose your identity, whether it's relational, whether it's professional, whether it's financial, spiritual, physical, ways that you can kind of get through that and get to the other side of it. Because again, it's never about moving on. It's never about getting over. It's about getting through. So the first tip is to realize that you're never going to be who you are before the loss. Like that's just not going to happen, right? Because you were a different person, or you should be a different person prior to this loss. So again, at the time, of my parents passing, I was Lauren the daughter and the caregiver. I'm not going to be Lauren the daughter and the caregiver because I'm not the daughter and the caregiver anymore because they're gone. So if we just talk about it, that's just the simplest way for me to put it, right? But at the end of the day, I told this to a friend one day. I said, you shouldn't be the person who you were before you had a loss, whether that's a divorce, whether that's a loss of a job, whether that's a loss of a human being. You should be different. You should grow from that, right? Because something traumatic happened in your life. So you should um, grow and change for the better. And I'm not saying that that always happens because we do know people who have lost somebody or have lost a relationship and now they savages and now they just sleeping with everybody and they're just doing all these things because they got their feelings hurt. But you should change and grow to be somebody better because that's never going to be your normal again. Like it's just not. Like this person who you were married to, and again, there's rare occasions when people do get, remarried to their ex, but typically people, you're never going to be married to this person again. This person who's passed away is never going to come back. This job that you had, you're probably not going to go back to it because maybe you wanted to, but maybe it's just closed forever or whatever the case may be. Like you're never gonna be in that space and time again. And so you should accept the fact that you're never gonna be who you were before that loss. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not gonna be a bad thing. Accept that you're gonna be different. Accept that you're gonna grow from that. And accept that this new normal can only be better because whatever because that was it was bad, right? What happened? Like grief is it comes from a loss. So you lost a job, you lost a person, you lost a relationship. So that those aren't things that are the greatest, right? And so you should accept the fact that good is going to come because that there was a bad thing that happened. The second thing is to let go of letting go and adopt adjusting. Because again, at the end of the day, like I tell people, you're never going to get over it. You're going to get through it. And I don't think it's about you letting go. I think it's about you adjusting to your new normal because there may be things from that past that you can bring into the present. Like there's things about my mom and my dad that are always going to be with me that I can bring with me into the present. There may be something that you learn in that marriage that you're going to bring with you in the present, or something that you learn that you don't want that is not good, or something that you left there which caused, the divorce that you're like, I'm not going to bring that into the present. So you just adjust. I don't think it's about letting go and saying like, F it, I'm done. That's the past, right? I don't think you should keep that door wide open, like, okay, come on, past, come on through. But I think you should take the lessons from it because there's always a lesson and a blessing in your grief. And I think you should take those lessons from it and bring it into your present to help you, again, to be able to grow and to be a better person and to move forward in a healthy way. And again, I'm not saying that you should just leave the past wide open and leave those wounds open. I think my biggest point is to bring the lessons and the blessings that came from that moment into your present and adjust based on those things that you learned. And the last thing that I'll kind of touch on is to, I think you really need to reflect on your identity. I think that once you go through something traumatic or once you go through something bad, you need to reflect on that moment to say, okay, what happened here? And obviously, if it's a loss, like this person died, right? But if it's not, like if it's, again, losing a job, losing a relationship, business failed, okay, what happened here? What were the lessons? And what do I want it to be moving forward? So for me, my mom and dad died. Okay, Loryn, your parents are gone. You are 32 years old. Your parents are gone. Who do you want to be without your parents? Because now you're that's who you are. You are Loryn. You're Black. You are spiritually connected to God. You have enough money in your checking, savings, and overflow to bless others. You are healthy, and you don't have any parents. And how do you want to identify? How do you want to move forward in that? How do you want to um, cope? How do you want to be in life when people talk to you? Do you want to be the girl who doesn't have any parents, or do you want to be all these other things? And unfortunately, she lost her parents. But oh God, like she's an amazing person. Like who do you want to be? And so I think you need to reflect on that when you go through that and really reflect on your identity of who you want to be. And that can be, you know, you can write that down. You can write it in your journal. You can write a book. You can paint. You can share with your friends. Or my personal favorite, go to therapy. Um, and really reflect on those things of your identity of who you want to be and how it shifted. And I'm not saying that your identity has to fully change. I think it just is going to shift a little bit, right? Because of whatever it is that you went through. And if you lost yourself in one of those, again, relational, professional, physical, spiritual, financial identities, you're just shifting your identity of who you are. And again, switching that verbiage of who you are. And I think it's important when you're doing that, when you're reflecting, to focus on the gains and not the losses. Because I think of again, we focus a lot of like, dang, like I lost my parents, man. Like I really lost my parents. But I shared with one of my girlfriends at the end of last year, like, yes, I both of my parents are gone. Like I lost my parents, but I gained, I'm not gonna say I gained so much more because that wasn't the case, but I gained a deeper meaning for relationships. I'm not saying that I never did before. I've always been a person who prided myself on relationships, but I will say that since my parents have passed, my relationships with my friends have gotten so much deeper than I could ever imagine. And I think that me and my friends have deep relationships anyway, but I just noticed kind of a shift in how deep they really went, and I really really appreciated that. And I for me, I believe it was a lot of the love that my parents gave and that my parents instilled in me to give. And it just, I don't know how to explain it. I just feel like they really, really got deeper. And so I focused on that and not the loss of my parents. I focused on the fact that I manifested, I wanted this job at this salary, and that's what I got. Now I'm manifesting a job with a higher salary. But, I'm focusing on those things, that happened. Instead of the fact that now I don't have these two human beings in my life, I'm focusing on the fact that now I have this podcast that came from it that I'm able to help people heal. I focused on the relationships that are coming from it, the opportunities that are coming from it. I'm just trying to focus on those things as opposed to the losses. So I think it's important when you're reflecting on your identity to focus on those gains and not those losses. And during this time, you can form new relationships, which most of the time will happen. You'll form some new relationships during the time, and it'll bring about that should, and if they don't, let them go. That should bring about positive changes to your life, that can bring new perspectives to your life, new skills, and just overall growth of a human being, right? Like at the end of the day, you, when you're reshifting or kind of rebuilding your identity, you need to have positive things in your life that are going to help you grow. And whether that's people, whether that's jobs, whether that's opportunities, whether that's what you're watching, you need to have these positive things to help you during this time when your identity is shifting. Because when you're lost, you're just out here. You're just out here. You don't know what's going on. So you need these things that are going to help you focus on the positives, the gains, not the losses, and bring about those new perspectives, bring about those new skills, and just help you grow overall. And if they're not, let them go, y'all. I mean, life is, the of course the term life is too short, but like it really is to be having things that are not going to help you grow in life, especially when you're in the middle of trying to reshift your identity. You have to have those positive things in your life, because if it's negative, oh my gosh, you're gonna have a literal identity crisis forever. Or you're gonna be like, okay, well, this person says I'm this, so this is what I'm gonna be. No, that's not it. Like I told you guys, identity is the story that you're telling yourself and how you define yourself. So if you're having positive people pour into you and you're pouring positivity into people, you can't help but to think you're an amazing person and turn into that amazing person if you're not quite there yet, right? So If it is not something that is going to help you grow, let it go. Let it go. Honestly, that is what I will say, is that you can adopt letting go when it comes to those negative influences, but any other time you adjust. So, honestly, like, if you think about it, like rebuilding yourself, rebuilding your identity, rebuilding your confidence, whatever it is that you lost, it can be slow and steady. They say slow and steady wins the race, right? It can be a slow process, and it requires a lot of self awareness to know that things will never be the same, but you can build new things from the past experiences, right? So you take, like I told you, you take those old pieces and you build new pieces from the past. So it takes a lot of self-awareness to do that. And it takes a lot of support to do that as well. And that's why it's important to have those positive things around you. Like I said, therapy, having positive friends, writing, art, exercise, whatever it is that is your positive thing, but it does take a lot of support. And as I always say, grief is a journey that you go through by yourself, but you're not alone. And so make sure you're having that support to do that. And as I always say, as you're rebuilding, as you're trying to redefine, as you're trying to grow, always give yourself grace and be kind to yourself. Because if you don't, who will? That is it, you guys. Thank you so much for listening to another week's episode of This Too Shall Suck podcast, where we talk about the real of grief, the whole grief, and nothing but the grief. This episode was produced by Mike Sick, and our original music is produced by Jimmy Samaj. You can follow me on social media on Instagram at TTSSPod, and you can visit my website at this2shallsuckpodcast.com. Also, feel free to drop me a line about any questions or any topics you want to hear, or just to say what's up at hello@this2shallsuckpodcast.com. Wherever you are listening, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and share this podcast with someone you think it could help. As always, I love you guys, and I'm sending you love and light in your life because you deserve it. I'll see you on the next episode. Mwah!